Dr. Mende, and I would like to finalize the histology of the central nervous system by discussing the histology of the cerebral cortex and actually the cerebrum. So it has an outer cortex and an inner medulla, outer gray matter and inner white matter. So the outer gray matter is the cerebral cortex, and the cortex is what forms the gray matter, and it has 6 layers. Okay, so in humans we have the neocortex that has 6 layers, and this neocortex includes both sensory, motor, and association areas. So you need to go back to that lecture on functional areas of the cerebral cortex so that you're able to appreciate that. But we have 3 types of cortices that are present. We have the neocortex, which is 90% of the total cortical area. So you have 6 layers in the neocortex. So it's homogeneous. Then there's paleocortex that covers some part of the base of the telencephalon, and it's heterogeneous. This is mainly at the olfactory area. Then there's the archicortex, where you have the hippocampal formation. So we have 2 types of neurons. We have the principal projection neurons. Remember, there are 2 types: pyramidal cells and fusiform cells. Pyramidal cells are pyramidal-shaped cell bodies. Okay, then fusiform shapes look sort of spindle-shaped. So those are the 2 projection fibers. So they'll project from the cortex to outer parts of the cerebral cortex. But we also have other cells within the cerebral cortex. They are called the interneurons. Okay, so these help communication between adjacent pyramidal and adjacent fusiform neurons. So we have cells of Martinotti. Okay, as you can see the green here, this is cell of Martinotti. Then you have the stellate cells. This is the stellate cell. It looks star-shaped. Then you have the horizontal cells of Cajal, which are usually in the superficial layer of the cerebral cortex. So these interneurons, they are just concerned with local processing of information, but the principal neurons aid in projection. The pyramidal and the fusiform are the projection fibers. Okay, so pyramidal cells, the cell bodies are pyramidal shaped. So when you see this image, these are pyramidal neurons, and the axons arise from the base of the pyramid, while the dendrites come from the apices of the pyramid. So the largest pyramidal cells that exist in the cerebral cortex are called the bed cells. Okay, and the main function of pyramidal cells, we say they are projection neurons. So output, they will project from the cerebral cortex to other areas. Then we have stellate cells. They are star-shaped because they're multipolar. Remember, you have many projections from the cell body, makes them multipolar, and they're also known as granular cells. And we say they form the interneurons. So they're the principal interneurons of the neocortex. So that's an example of a stellate chip. It's multipolar. Then we have the cells of Martinotti. These are polygonal cells. Look at this. They are polygonal and they have very short dendrites, and the axons actually go to the surface of the cell, and then after reaching the surface they bifurcate into 2 in the superficial layer. So they have an axon that goes to the surface, then bifurcates into 2 and courses horizontally in the superficial layers. These cells of Martinotti usually synapse with the pyramidal cells. So you can see the Martinotti cell synapsing with pyramidal cell. Then we have fusiform cells. These are projection, just like pyramidal, they're projection cells, but they're spindle in shape, and they're oriented 90 at right angle, 90 degrees to the cortex. Okay, so you can see the cortex, the layers of the cortex are horizontal, but it's vertical. So at right angle to the cortex, and the axons arise from the side of the cell body. So the cell body is fusiform or spindle shaped. You can see the axon is coming from the side of the cell body, and then it passes to the superficial layers of the cerebral cortex. What's the main function of fusiform neurons? Projection. So you're able to project to other parts of the CNS. Then we have the horizontal cells of Cajal. The horizontal cells are in the superficial layer, and they're able to synapse with dendrites. Neocortex has 6 layers, and you can't read the layer. The distinction is not obvious, but the most is the molecular or the plex, then followed by outer granular layer where they look like granules of sand, then outer pyramidal where you have pyramidal deep, and the 6 layers are not usually equally prominent. Okay? And so therefore you have granular ends. Those are the 6 layers of the neocortex. So from the plexiform layer, it's the most superficial. It contains many dendrites and axonal synapses, and you have sparse cell bodies of nuclei in the neuroglial cells, and that's where you find the horizontal cells of Cajal. After that, you have the outer granular layer, in this place you have stellate cells and small pyramidal cells. Then of course you have various axons and dendritic connections. Then when you get to the pyramidal cell layer, you have moderate pyramidal cells in the outer pyramidal layer, and these are large pyramidal cells. In the inner pyramidal layer, they are actually larger pyramidal cells. Then in the outer pyramidal, they are moderately sized. Then in the pyramidal cell layer, you may also see the Martinotti cells. Then in the inner granular layer, it's granular because of granular cells, which are also stellate cells. And the inner granular layer has actually densely packed stellate cells. So they're more densely packed than in the outer granular layer. Then the inner pyramidal layer has large pyramidal cells. You also have stellate cells and some cells of Martinotti. And inner pyramidal layer has large cells, and the largest pyramidal cell is the bed cells. And mainly they're found in the motor cortex. Okay? Then we have the multiform cell layer, which is the last layer of the cerebral cortex. It has all morphological forms of cells, so all cell types. And the fusiform cells are in the deeper portion, but you also find other cells in the superficial part of the multiform cell layer. So layers 1 to 4 are usually considered afferents, and layers 5 and 6 are efferent. So you have sensory information coming in between layers 1 to 4. So they will receive from the thalamus, while layers 5 and 6, they are efferent, so they are motor. So you have fibers will arise from layer 5, then they will go downwards to the subcortical areas. Okay, so you have corticofugal fibers will leave layers 5 and 6 to the thalamus and downwards. So efferent fibers that will leave the cortex, while afferent to the cortex project to layer 1 and 4. So these are the references that were used to prepare this presentation, and thank you very, very much.